Right, Marina, thank you so much. Marina, thank you for the introduction, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for the webinar on managing employees in uncertain times. My name is Rensia Melles, and I am a CMHA workplace certified psychological health and safety advisor and a workplace mental health specialist. I'm the founder of Integral Workplace Health, and through that organization, I support organizations with consultation, assessment, planning, and with hands-on support with training and workshops around mental health and mental health factors in the workplace. I have over 20 years of experience with a background in psychology in working with multinationals around the world, as well as based in Canada, in supporting their employees, and also with nonprofit organizations around the world, supporting people with the mental health in the workplace, with mental health and well-being and productivity. One of the things that I always talk about before I start going into the material, and we have quite a lot of material, is I tell people how I present. I do not read slides to people. People are quite capable of reading slides themselves. And what I will do is there's a lot of information on the slides, and I'm not going to read and go into every single point. Some of them are kind of self-explanatory. And so as we go along, if you do have questions, if you think that there's something that you need to clarify, please put it in the question box and we'll get back to that. Otherwise, I will be highlighting and speaking to you about our topic today. And what we're going to be talking about is we're going to start talking a bit about understanding mental health and what has been happening with people as a consequence of both the illness and the impact of the measures and the lockdown. We're going to be talking a bit about you as a leader, thinking about what kind of a leader am I, what are my pitfalls, what are my strengths, how do I approach people, how do I approach my leadership, and we're going to talk about some very concrete, down-to-earth how to do things in conversations with people. So let's start by talking a bit about mental health and COVID-19, because it's quite an unusual situation that we find ourselves in. And when we talk about mental health, we always need to start with defining what is mental health, because there's a lot of talk about it. There's lots of media attention to the impact of mental health, about people having more depression or more anxiety as a consequence of COVID-19. And this is the definition that I use, and it's very close to the definition of Canada Public Health. It's very close to the definition that you will find, for instance, with various psychological and psychiatric associations. And it's really important to understand how we define mental health. And first of all, what you see in this definition is it talks about our feelings of well-being, how we are within ourselves. It also talks about how we cope and how we are in the world around us. So it talks about our ability to cope with day-to-day stressors and how competent we are, how much mastery and sense of achievement and contribution we have in our relationship with the world around us. And then it talks about the importance of our relationships and how they contribute to our mental health, being part of a community and being able to contribute to a community. And what you will notice, and one of the most important parts of this, is not just the idea that mental health is not just something that is internal inside of our head, but that it has a lot to do with our relationship and our coping with the world around us and the people around us, is that what is missing here is it is not the absence of illness. And that's really important to understand. In the same way that somebody can have diabetes and run a marathon and be fit enough for that, or somebody who does not have a medical diagnosis of diabetes is still not fit enough to walk around the block without having to catch their breath. In the same way, having poor mental health doesn't mean that you are mentally ill, and having a diagnosed mental illness does not imply that you can't have good, positive mental health. And I think that's an important distinction to keep in mind as we're going through the impact of COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 has presented us with some really unique confluence of stressors, because not only are we worried about being ill, worried about people that are ill or about the risks of becoming ill and everything we need to do about that. But at the same time, it has impacted the lockdowns, and the measures have impacted our personal life, our family life. They've affected our work, our engagement with the community, our ability to socialize. So all of the aspects of our life that help us define that mental health, our relationships to people, our ability to feel that we are coping, our mastery, and our sense of achievement, all of these things have been impacted by the changes that we're undergoing as a consequence of this current situation around the world with COVID-19. Our normal mechanisms of coping are disrupted. So not only do we have a lot more stressors in all of the areas of our life, the things that we usually do to cope may not be available to us. And even with the changes with the, stage 3 opening up of things, it's still different than it was before. So socializing, if we usually cope by going out and hanging out with our friends, that's a whole other ballgame than it was before COVID. And there's fewer people that we can hang with. Socializing has changed. Our access to exercise and going to the gym has changed. All of those things that we do to cope have also been either changed or they've been blocked for us, which of course impacts our ability to sustain our mental health and to cope with all those stressors. And the other thing that's very unique about COVID-19 is that there is no end in sight. It is an indefinite disruption, and we don't really know where we're going and what the world is going to look like afterwards. And so this impact that people are experiencing, there's no blame, no judgment, no shame in that. It is a very normal reaction for people to have a dip in their mental health because they're dealing with some very unusual and abnormal circumstances. This grid is one that I think people will recognize in their own development and in the people around them. So this comes actually from disaster management research and disaster management guidelines. So what happens when a disaster strikes is that there is a pre-period. We were hearing about COVID-19. There were some rumors. There was rumbling. And then suddenly by April, 3.9 billion people around the world found themselves in lockdown as a consequence of this crisis with COVID-19 and the protective measures. Now, the first reaction was optimistic. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was lots of people doing the Bohemian Rhapsody. There was on Facebook. There's lots of funny memes happening because people are optimistic. We can get through this. This is a challenge, and we are strong, and this is going to go away, and we're going to deal with this. The other thing that happened is that people realized we're in this together, and they start to pull together with each other. And maybe you started reaching out to people that you hadn't talked to for a while and to ask how they were doing, or people reached out to you to say, hey, with everything that's going on, are you safe? Are you well? What's going on with you? How are you doing? So now we have a sense of cohesion and community, and we're going to get through this, and we're volunteering to pick up groceries for our elderly neighbors. All of these things start to happen. That's the start. Eventually, people get tired. And this is, I think, where many people will recognize that we're starting to slide into. And what starts happening there is you can only be stretched out of your normal shape, doing Bohemian Rhapsody and doing all this volunteer work and adapting to working from home and making funny memes about it for so long. And then we need to have some kind of predictability and stability again, some kind of sense of normalcy. And so people are starting to get tired. They're getting literally what is called adaptation fatigue, where they're constantly needing to think about different things. And it's not the big things. It's not the numbers of COVID. It's the small things that you can't just run out to the store, that you need to stand in line to pick something up, that you need to think ahead of time. You don't just go out for everything on a one-off basis. Now you need to make your list. You need to consider, does it make sense to go to the store? people are starting to get tired and fatigued about not being able to do things the way they used to. And one of the things that you also get there, of course, is a certain level of higher risk-taking behavior, because people are just tired and they just don't want to have to be making those decisions the whole time. The unique thing about COVID-19, and there's a lot of talk about this in the psychological community and the mental health community, is normally when there's a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, people know how to rebuild. You know, your house is washed away, you build a new house. You know, the forest fire has come through, you start to plant new trees. One of the big challenges for people and for leaders is that there is so many unknowns that we have going into the future. COVID-19, we don't know how to rebuild. We have no idea what the new normal is going to look about. We don't know how to plan. How do we plan our weddings? What's going to happen? You know, how do I date somebody? How do I sell my house? How do I change jobs or look for a job? All of these things are not settling back into our existing practices where we knew exactly what the protocols were to follow and to pick those up. And so that is also having a lasting impact. And that's an impact that's not just there on other people, that's there for you, whether you're a leader or not. That is affecting everybody going through this. So as time goes by, what we're seeing is people are having ongoing stress because they continually need to be coping with adaptation, with new stressors, new information coming through, new adjustments. They're carrying loss and grief with them. And that is two ways. That is loss and grief about our day-to-day practice, the things that we're used to. We can't go to the beach the way that we used to. We're not going on vacation the way that we used to. It's also the mourning of loved ones that have become ill and that we have lost in this process. And it's a mourning without closure and a mourning without opportunities to say goodbye and have a funeral to connect with our community. So these are things that people are carrying with them as time goes by, and they continue to try and be productive and participate, whether it's in workplace or whether it's in participating in their community service and their nonprofit organizations. This is what people are carrying with them. They're carrying with them some residual stress and trauma. They may have had experiences. Maybe somebody had a swab stuck up their nose to see if they had COVID and worried that they had it. Maybe they were sick and spent time in the hospital and are still recovering. And perhaps they thought they were going to die and there was nobody there with them. So people are carrying this with them. People are confused because there's so many unknowns. And so I already mentioned the risk-taking behavior and the fatigue. And one of the things that we need to understand, particularly as leaders, is that with COVID-19, even though a lot of people went through that, I mentioned 3.9 billion people were in lockdown in April. It has a unique signature for each individual in their different circumstances in what they may have encountered as a consequence of either being ill or illness with their loved ones or with the changes in their day-to-day practice. And when people get stressed, I'm not going to go through each of these different points as examples of how it manifests. How we experience stress and what you're going to be seeing as a leader and what you may yourself as a leader be experiencing is that it manifests itself in our body. It manifests itself in our heart and how we experience our emotions. It manifests in our ability to think, and it manifests in how we behave around people, whether we come closer to people or withdraw from people, how we express ourselves, how productive we're able to be, and perhaps if we start to rely more on using substances where our behavior changes. And one of the things that we need to know is that that stress reaction, that's an automatic reaction. Again, there is no blame, there is no shame, there is no weakness or failure in having a stress reaction to an extremely unusual situation and very big challenges in our day-to-day life. how people go into this. Everybody has their own personal profile. And if you're looking at this, you can probably identify for yourself that maybe you're somebody who experiences stress primarily in the physical. Maybe you're somebody who starts clenching jaws and starts having a hard time sleeping, or can't stay awake and escapes into sleep. Maybe you're somebody who finds that it's really hard for you to concentrate or to regulate your emotions and to keep that under control and not let that show through the whole time. Or perhaps you find yourself not being able to perform and not being able to be productive the way that you expect yourself to be. Everybody has their own of these, and they're not mutually exclusive. You will have each of these in some level, but some of them are going to be more of your preference. And that means that the people around you are going to have the same kind of personal stress signature around how they manifest stress. And that may be influenced by their age, their gender, can may be influenced by their starting point, by their personality. It can be influenced by culture, which can influence, whether you express yourself more in the physical or use physical metaphors rather than emotional metaphors, because different cultures have different values and different beliefs about what's okay to express and how to express yourself when you're going through stuff. And of course, your life experiences are going to contribute to how your stress signature manifests. And as a leader, it's important for you to keep this in mind when you're talking to other people, that there is no one size fits all, and that you need to be cautious about how you interpret people's behaviors and respond and not project your response on them. Now, of course, all of this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what happens with people at home or in their personal life, each of those areas of life are going to be impacted. This is the home and the workplace that I put here, but of course there's much more to people. And all of these pieces, our personal life, who we are as people, our community involvement, our work involvement, our learning, our growth, all of these aspects of life, there will be a spillover. If you are stressed, this is not something that happens in a vacuum, and that will manifest itself in different parts of our life. Now, when you are looking at people and you're looking for signs of stress and you're trying to figure out, should I be concerned? It's what is going on with the people that I am responsible for and the people I'm responsible to as a leader. First of all, that little picture is very rare. Very rarely will you encounter somebody who flies completely off the handle. That's, that only really happens on TV and movies, where people start throwing stuff and they smash stuff off their desk and they just kind of lose it and they storm out. That's really not what we see. What we need to be looking for is, we're looking for change patterns from what we expect and know about people. And so we're looking, not because everybody has a bad day once in a while. So it's a change, and it's a recurring pattern of change. So if we know somebody that we know is always being really cheerful and participatory in meetings and has ideas or reaches out to people, and they're not doing that, and they're not doing that on an ongoing basis, if you're noticing that, then that's a sign that something's going on with them that you as a leader may need to address with them to support them. How people express themselves. You may be meeting somebody on Zoom or in person that they're just not taking care of themselves. They've got rings under their eyes, or they're not dressing properly. They are, they're growing their beard and it's scraggly. They're not getting their haircut. I know people are not getting a haircut, but there is taking care of yourselves and taking care of your appearance and presenting yourself in, for instance, more formal situations, where if we're seeing that people are changing from what we expect from them and what we know about them, these are signs that something has changes. And then when you see that change, first of all, you need to suspend your judgment and you need to explore that with the person. Don't assume that you know what's going on or what the cause of their stress may be. It is something that you then want to engage in conversation with them to find out. And we're going to have, at the last part of this, we're going to have some really concrete talk about how do you engage in that conversation. But before that, I want to talk about defining yourself as a leader and what is leadership. Now, when I'm talking about leaders and leadership, I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about a particular level. I am talking really about anybody who is in a position of influence and power, and who is guiding people or bringing people to be on board around achieving objectives or achieving a vision. And that can be anything from organizing a neighborhood pickup or a neighborhood charity to running an organization or being a manager in a mid-level who is running a team. All of these positions, you have some power, you are trying to influence people, and you are trying to bring them on board towards shared objectives. So this is very broad, and the principles that we're talking about are going to be applicable to everyone. So leadership should be super easy. Plato talked about this 2,300 years ago. Modern psychology is finding the same kinds of virtues about what it takes to be a leader, and around the globe, people bring forward the same, whether it's North America, whether it's Europe, whether it's China, or whether it's Africa. The same kind of virtues for leaders keep surfacing over and over again. So it really should be, following the 1, 2, 3. And these principles do hold true, but in practice, it's a lot harder than it looks. And why is that? Because leaders are humans too. Leaders experience stress and anxiety the same way that other people do. They have different levels of people skills and comfort with people in terms of engaging in a conversation and inviting somebody to share what's going on with them. The other thing is, of course, as a leader, we are just like everybody else. Our implicit values and perceptions about who people are, what we expect from people, is going to impact how we make our decisions and how we approach our interactions with people and how we talk to people. And then finally, and this one is really important, leadership changes you. Research shows over and over that people who come into power, and even if it's just a little bit of power over other people, whether that can be because you have a heightened status, whether you are managing a team, they change. And the higher people are up in the hierarchy, the harder it becomes for them to be empathic and to read the room, to be aware of other people. And that's just a neurological piece of research. And I have a section that you'll find in your version of the slides that has reading material for you about that and how that works. I'm not making this up. Leadership actually changes your brain. It affects your neurons. You're mirroring neurons. And I apologize for the phone in the background if you're hearing that. That's one thing I wasn't able to turn off. And so, but people that are in positions of power and who become leaders, they change. And so that's not a matter, again, of judgment or blame. It's a matter of knowing that that happens to you, and that you need to make some conscious decisions once you know that there are changes associated with becoming into power, because it affects how we relate to people and how people relate to us. And of course, COVID-19, the whole circumstance, because everything is disrupted, is an amazing opportunity for us to consider ourselves as leaders. What do we believe is leadership? How do we lead? What have we been doing? What's been going well in how we motivate people and bring people on board? How we guide people towards goals? What hasn't been working well? What can we work on to improve? So this is a great opportunity for people to own and to reset perhaps some of the behaviors that have not worked well for them or the people that they are trying to influence and to lead. And of course, at the same time, COVID-19 has also really heightened our need to be effective as leaders, because we need people to be able to move forward, and to, whether it's a small initiative in our neighborhood or whether we're leading an organization, ultimately, we need to be able to move forward and stay successful, sustain ourselves, and that comes down to how engaged are the people and how productive and healthy are they in working for us and helping us achieve those objectives, regardless of what that objective may be and at what level that objective may be. So let's talk a bit about what that takes. Steps to effective taking ownership. And that means that we work on our head, our heart, and our body, that we take care of ourselves, and that we look at who are we and what do we want to do as leaders. Now, I'm not going to read all of these points to you, but one of the things that we realize is, and that what research shows us, is that when people change and when they become into leadership roles, and the more power they have, the harder it gets. They change in their perceptions of people. People often become more lonely. They often get a much less positive view of other people. They think that they often they get a sort of form of hubris. And I hesitate to say these things, because when we become leaders, we don't think we do these things, and we don't know how much we change. So for you, part of your assignment is to go back and think about, what do I think a leader is? What is a leader that I would emulate? How am I actually living my values? If that's what I think a leader is, how am I doing that? Is it actually working for me? So these are all questions that you need to ask yourself. Does a leader always need to be strong? How do I achieve those virtues of leadership? Am I actually living those things? And so you need to be able to challenge yourself and look at, what are my current beliefs? What have I become over time? And how do I have the courage to challenge those beliefs? And why does that matter? Because this is a time where we have the opportunity to review those things, to think about that, to reset and to own our behaviors and our beliefs. Because the Pygmalion effect, because the way that you treat people is exactly how you're going to find them. They will respond to the way that you treat them. And your beliefs will come through on 1,000 different levels. It comes through on day-to-day decisions. It becomes through in how you talk to people, how you perceive people, the kind of words that you choose. So you need to really think about, who am I and how am I behaving? Because you will find what you create. The other thing is that they found, research shows over and over, that people have executive blind spots. The further people are up on the ladder, and the more power people have, the bigger the discrepancy is between how they think they are and how they see themselves and how other people see them. And not only is there a discrepancy between how they see themselves and how other people see them, but nobody wants to tell you, because once you're in that position, it's very difficult for people to come to you. And you just may just be a manager of a team of 5 or 6 or 3 people. Even on that level, you may find that people have a hard time giving you feedback when you are behaving rudely, or when you are being condescending or assuming or distrusting. People don't tell you that, and you may not even notice that yourself. And so you have an obligation to look at that for yourself and examine that and grow your self-awareness around, what are people really thinking about me? How am I really behaving? And is that working for me? On top of that, you are a role model. As a leader, people look to you. They will behave as you treat them. They will behave as you behave. And of course, the self-awareness is part of living Plato's, humility and truthfulness virtues of being a good and an effective leader. Now let's talk about emotional regulation and our heart. One of the things that we often don't realize, we don't stop to think about, how am I feeling? Now, if you are feeling distrustful, anxious, worried, angry about people, that spills over in 1,000 ways in your behavior. It is the way that you roll your eyes, how you use your voice, and those are automatic things. It's not about the fact that that happens. There's no judgment there. The point is that you have a choice to think about am I regulating my emotions? How am I feeling? Is that mine to own? Or do I put that on the other person? Do I now behave that person if I'm feeling anxious? Do I now behave in an anxious manner with that other person if I don't trust them? Because again, you will find what you create. And so that your emotion is contagious. If you're anxious, people around you will become anxious. And you are a role model. One of the things that comes up over and over for leaders that really inspire people to come and to follow them and to take their guidance and trust them is that they're able to project confidence. It doesn't mean that they deny that things may be difficult. It doesn't mean that they deny that things are hard and that there's a challenge before them. But they project two things. They project confidence that they can handle it, and they project optimism. They project a belief that things will work out and that they will be able to make a difference and things will work out positively. And you know what? I always hesitate to make this because it seems somewhat condescending, but it is very similar to what you do as a parent. When there are challenges, you don't tell your kid how horrible things are. You tell your kid, you may acknowledge, yeah, things are really hard right now, but I will take care of it. I have the ability to fix this, and I am positive that this will come out okay. And it's a very similar kind of mandate that you have as a leader going forward and trying to bring people on forward. And again, this feeds right back into, some of those virtues, such as temperance. That means making decisions not based on whatever emotion you're feeling at that particular point in time, but being able to step back, to step away from your anxiety or your fear of loss, and being able to temper your behavior so that you can move forward and make those choices. And it takes courage. It's a way to demonstrate courage to people. And again, if you're not doing it yourself, people are going to be really hesitant to tell you about it. Finally, self-care is a part of being a leader. And these are not, wow, I've never heard about exercise being important or sleep. It's not about knowing these things are important. It's the question really here is, are you doing these things? And if you're not, why not? And what would convince you to do these things? Because as simple as they seem, they're often the first go-to and the easiest way to find your balance so that you can open up yourself to look at what are my emotions, to look at what are my beliefs, because your mind and your body are connected. If you are in bad physical shape, if you're not taking care of yourself, it becomes really hard to regulate your emotions, to stop and think about what beliefs am I living here? Is this according to my values? Is this the way that I want to project myself? Because it's just much harder. We don't have the mental and physical energy to do those things, because you want to be there in the long run. You want to be resilient, and you're role modeling that to other people. You're giving people permission. If you want your people to be there, and again, people in the broadest sense, whether it's your team, whether it's your whole organization of employees and volunteers, or whether it's the group that you want, if you are in a relationship of influence, you want to be able, by role modeling, give people permission and care and encourage others to take care of themselves, because you want them to be engaged. You want them to trust you. You want them to know that you as a leader are looking out for them and want them to look out for themselves as well. So those are some of the things that you need to be thinking about. Mind, heart, and body as a leader, that you really need to put some additional effort into as a leader to make sure that you can be effective and live those virtues that will make people want to work with you, make people want to follow you, and help you achieve your mandate, regardless of how big or how small that mandate and that objective is. So we talked about the people that you're dealing with, which includes you, and what's going on with them around COVID. And we're talked about what you need to do as a leader to take ownership and to really consciously be able to step up to that role. Now let's talk a little bit about just practicalities in how to engage in that conversation. I really like this quote because really this is the difference between leadership and management. And you can be a leader or a manager. And again, it doesn't matter what level you're at, if you're managing a large organization as a leader, or whether you're running a team or a small neighborhood project or a family. Leadership is doing the right things. Management is making people do things. And for those who use different tools, whether it's monitoring and discipline, managers use different tools than leadership. And management is essentially, one of the definitions that I read of management is making people do things they don't want to do and find ways to make people do things. Leaders bring people on board and inspire them to do the things and want to do the things that you would like them to do for success and to achieve your objectives and your vision. Now, when we go into conversation as human beings, there's a couple of pitfalls that we walk into. And jumping to conclusions is one of the ones that comes from, we think that we already know where it's going, and that can be part of our hubris. Because we already know we're in a powerful position and we've already made up our mind where we think we know that person, we think where this is already going, and so we think we know. Well, we don't. And so we don't take the time to explore. And this is one of those things. The other thing that makes us jump to conclusions is often that we think it's better time management to jump to the conclusion than to slow down and take the time to actually listen to what's going on and figure out how to interpret that, rather than having 3 words and then figuring out what you think is going to happen. The similar process happens with solutions. If we just assume that people are going to do what we tell them to do because we're leaders, now we know that doesn't work, because 80 or 90% of change management initiatives fail because there's a mandate from the top, and we just assumed that because we told people they needed to do it differently, they were going to do it differently. Well, guess what? People don't. So just because you tell them what they're supposed to do doesn't mean that people are ready to do it or able to do it. So again, that's not a good investment of your time. It is a good investment to step back and take the time to explore with somebody what is going on with them, to listen to them before you start handing out solutions. The other thing is blurred boundaries, and this has a lot to do with what is my mandate and what is my role with people. And this is something that I've encountered a lot with a lot of people, where they overstep, where sometimes they tell people more or direct people into things that are really outside of what you're allowed to expect from that person, because it steps into their personal life, which is really none of your business. The other thing that I often see is, because we are human and because we want to be liked and we want to do the right thing, I also see that sometimes managers or people, they overstep and they become caregivers when that's not part of their mandate. So you really need to think about, what can I and can I not do for that person? What is the nature of my relationship with that person? And what can I do for that person within that mandate and that relationships, rather than going into role confusion where managers end up being caregivers or covering up because they have compassion and empathy for somebody, or where people are trying to direct people to do things outside of that mandate that are not relevant to what you need from that person. So to get yourself in that place where you can avoid some of these pitfalls, where you can slow down enough to take this time, the first easiest thing to do is breathe. Consciously breathe, because when we are feeling rushed, when we are urgent, when we are anxious about a conversation, our whole limbic system kicks in. We have our own stress reaction, and that means that we start breathing shallow, that we start having increased heart rate, and you can slow that down to help you focus by doing just a couple of conscious, slow breaths, where you just get your body realigned to slow down. That also helps with your emotional regulation, so that you are not spilling anxiety and stress over the whole time. The other thing is you want to think about, who am I? You're allowed to say, it's okay, I don't know. That actually is appreciated with people. That piece of humanity, which again is one of those Plato virtues, that's how it translates into day-to-day practice. Being able to say to somebody, you know what, I don't know, I need to figure that out, but I will, and I can. I'm sure we can come to a solution. I don't know it right now. You're allowed to admit, you know what, this has affected me too. I'm also struggling. I'm having a hard time. I'm also at home. It's okay. I am a human being like you. I did a lot of work when people were sent out to support, 9/11. And I know that sounds like a really long time ago, but one of the core lessons that we learned was that leaders that admitted that they were affected themselves were much better at getting people to move forward, to take care of themselves, and to continue to engage and to move forward with the objectives of the organization that they were with, because of that mutual acknowledgement, and that breaking the roles of formal roles. And it's okay to draw boundaries. This is a very important one. Again, those are boundaries around what you can and cannot do, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and where you can be drawn into different role confusion. One of the things that you want to do is you want to really learn to use the word maybe. When we have those thoughts, when we have those beliefs and values that pop into our head, when we want to jump to conclusions, just incorporating the word maybe as a piece of doubt where you allow yourself and give yourself that split second to consider will help you to suspend your judgment and open you up to explore further rather than jumping to conclusions and jumping to solutions. These are really simple things. They're simple, and I know that they're hard to do because you really need to develop a habit of it. But if you can start slowing yourself down, if you can start thinking maybe rather than assuming that you have it and you know it, and that you know that other person, will make all the difference. One of the things I need to highlight is leave the crown in the garage. I love this one. And this is really Plato, or Plato, whichever way you want to pronounce it, says, be kind for everyone you meet, because everyone is fighting a hard battle. And this also, the leaving your crown in the garage, comes from Indra Nooyi. She is the CEO of PepsiCo, and she tells the story of how she found out that she was going to be the CEO of PepsiCo. She went home and she got home and she says to her mom, she says, Mom, I've got great news. And her mother says, yeah, that can wait. I just need you to go and get some milk. We're out of milk. So Indra goes, gets the milk. But by now she's incensed. She gets home and she confronts her mom. She says, Mom, I just became the CEO of PepsiCo. Do you realize what a big deal this is? And you're making me go out to go and get milk. And her mother said to her, listen, you're still my daughter. I am still your mother. So when you come here, you can leave your crown in the garage. And I think that's a wonderful metaphor for the humility that you want to bring in the conversations with people, rather than coming off as the I know it, I am the leader, and recognizing that we're all human beings, and that your people, the people you are talking to, they are your employee, they are your volunteer, they are your neighbor, they are also mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, children, parents. So these are things that you need to remember, and so are you. And that's where you connect with people, to leave your crown in the garage, to open up that conversation, to truly be able to respond to people. Now, the last two are very specific to COVID and the challenges of COVID, because COVID has changed how we work. And I know there are companies that have been tempted to really do this monitoring, this, get the software to make sure that people are sitting in front of their screen all day, to make sure that their keystrokes are happening all the time. When you're doing that, that's an expression of a basic belief that you need to confront, whether you believe that or not, that people can't be trusted. And then you need to remember that you will find what you create. People will respond the way that you treat them. So if you do that, your people are going to find a way. You know that when we got the Fitbit and everybody was on the Fitbit and people just tied it to their cat? And that works in the same way. They will find ways to create keystrokes that have nothing to do with what they're supposed to be doing for you. So one of the things that you want to think of, do you want to let go of micromanaging? You want to think about trust. Do I trust people? And do I want to treat them as if I trust them so that they can in turn trust you? So you want to focus on outcomes versus hours. The other thing, and of course, people have disrupted because they can't work all day long because they have their kids at home, they have their spouses at home. So the whole way that people work has changed a lot. And whether that's in terms of how they can contribute to your cause or whether they can contribute to your professional organization as an employee. The other thing is you want to focus on good and emergent practice and be adaptable. With COVID, a lot of the things that we had best practice for have fallen by the wayside. We don't really know what best practice anymore is because we're in kind of like an unknown and uncharted territory. So there are things that we know we don't know about the future, and there are things that we don't even know that we don't know them. And that means that in terms of responding and being effective, we need to be looking at good practice rather than best practice that we can adapt and readjust over time. And we need to be looking at emergent practices. Again, what's coming up in response to what we're learning as we go along. And we want to look at what kind of practice, how do we adapt that as we learn more about the things that we didn't even know we didn't know. So those are some of the things that you want to be changing as a leader. And that comes to you because you are the one that sets the tone on those things as a leader. This is a statement from the CEO of Siemens, and he made a lot of waves when he made the statement, and it really indicates it's a recognition of how the world has changed and how we need to move away from seats and chairs and having focusing on individual tasks, but looking at the outcomes that people have and giving people the freedom to meet their mandate in different kinds of ways. Now, as we're going into interactions, we talked about this, you're role modeling, you can role model accountability, self-care, kindness in how you treat people. What I do want to highlight there for you is the communication piece. And you want to think about this as three apples. And everybody has heard about, listening and empathizing and all this kind of stuff, and they're hard to do. You want to look at these as the three apples. In Armenian folklore, stories don't end with, and then they lived happily ever after. They end their stories with, and then three apples fell from heaven. One for the teller, one for the listener, and one for the one who understood and heard the story. And I think it's important that you recognize that we want that last apple. You are the teller. You may be speaking to people. You want to be able to listen to what people are saying. But you want to take the time to hear what it is they're saying by connecting with them and asking them further questions. Connecting on a regular basis, communicating on a regular basis. These are all things that you can find in any article. When you look for Forbes or Harvard Business Review, they're all going to talk about these things. Another one for you, if you are wanting to transcend some of your own anxieties, if you want to transcend some of your beliefs that are getting in the way, you may want to practice gratitude. Saying thank you to people, acknowledging people by being responsive are really simple ways to gain trust and express to people that you are there as a leader and that you want to support them. And facilitating people into resources. So whatever is within your mandate, look at what can I do for that person to make it easier for them to do their job, just hook them up with the resources to help them achieve mental health, engagement, and productivity. So when you're going into a conversation, this is the really nitty-gritty of preparing for a conversation. So you're going into a conversation. There's a couple of things that you want to do. And some of them speak for themselves. When I'm talking about timing, I'm talking about your timing and the timing of the other person. So this is, don't talk to people at 4:30 on Friday. Maybe it's not a good idea to bring people in on the lunch break. If they are on lunch break, you want to give them the message that it's important for them to take care of themselves and to be able to take a break. So think about what's good timing for them. You know, when they come in from, maybe they're having to drop their kids off at daycare. Maybe you just dropped your kids off at daycare and you're frazzled. So think about what's a good time where I can have a good conversation with somebody if I really consciously am reaching out to connect to that person. The other thing is the emotional self-regulation. The easiest thing, and I've already mentioned this, is taking a number of breaths, asking yourself, am I feeling angry, upset, urgent, anxious about this conversation? Taking breaths to calm yourself down, to be aware of that, and to avoid that spilling over and becoming contagious to the person that you're talking to. When you're preparing, make sure that you have some resources at hand. Use your own resources, consultants, if you have an employee assistance program, whatever it is that you can use, whether you have a mentor that you can use, and have resources available for that person if you want to facilitate forward. Think about what you can and cannot do and what you want out of that conversation. If it's on video, you know, if you want, make sure that everything is working, and continue to take care of yourself so that you can have that clarity and focus that you need to enter in that conversation, to listen and to hear what people are saying. When you engage in the conversation with people, you want to address the obvious. Don't pretend like nothing's going on. And when you do that, the conversation isn't about how are you doing? Because when you say that, and especially if you're in a position of power, people are just going to say fine. Anyone who's a parent knows when you ask your kid, how was your school day? They'll say fine. When you ask them, what did you like? What did you not like? What would you do differently? That's when you get the conversation where you are not just showing interest in people, but you're also getting an opening to be able to move people forward and support them. Then you want to acknowledge that. This is that, again, recognizing that third apple. And I is bigger than you. So what you want to be doing is making I statements. When you acknowledge them, this is what I heard you say. Help me understand. This is what I see. This is what I understand. Is that correct? That's validating and acknowledging and letting people know that you listened and heard what they were saying. If you're worried about people, there are things that people don't necessarily say that you may be picking up. And we are much more intuitive about these things than we recognize. For instance, somebody who's talking continually about, oh, I'm working really hard and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this task and that task. As a leader, if you want people to stay engaged and you want to encourage people for self-care, you may ask, hey, how are you really doing? And I haven't heard you talk about self-care. What are you doing to make sure that you're getting through this well? Of course, there's a possibility that people don't want to talk to you, that they don't want to go there, and then you need to respect that boundary. People need to know that what you're talking about with them is confidential, and it really can be confidential unless there are big concerns that require either an intervention because it's very inappropriate or because it's a risk of harm to themselves or to others. Other than that, that conversation needs to be between you. And following up is just another one of those ways to show people, hey, I really care. I'm not just talking to you right now because I'm supposed to. I'm talking to you because I care. So let's check in. I'd like to follow up. I want to stay in touch, stay connected with people, acknowledge them, and let them know. Now, there is another kind of conversation where you may be taking the lead. You've already noticed that pattern of change where they're not behaving the same way, where you're thinking perhaps they're at risk, perhaps their productivity and their performance have dropped, they're not taking care of themselves. Then if you're the one that's taken the lead and you have something that you need to share with them, you share that with them in the form of observations, rather than saying, you are stressed, you're doing this or you're not doing this. You want to use I statements. I have noticed this. I am concerned for you. I am worried. And what can I do for you? Where you validate what people give back to you, and you invite people to talk by telling them, look, this is what I saw, and I care for you. I'm concerned about this. Or you can talk to them, you know, when that happens, this is the consequence. When you don't show up, when you book yourself to be part of our team, and this can be for volunteer stuff, you know, when you book and then you don't follow through, and I've seen that that's happened, then this is what happens. Other people need to pick it up, or people are left in the cold. So can you please tell me, how can I help you? Or what do we need to change to make this possible? Asking questions, acknowledging to people, again, offering the support and the resources and following through. And confidentiality is always key. If you want to open the door and invite people to truly allow them to be led by you and to support you in achieving your mandate and your objectives, regardless how big or how small it is, you want to engage in this kind of a conversation. So in summary, and I know this was a lot of information, and I am going to stay online for some questions and answers if people have those. COVID has really impacted people. It has turned lives upside down, and each individual person is experiencing this in their own way. And people are having very normal reactions to a very unusual continuing situation where there is no long-term resolve on what the world is going to look like and what people can count on and plan for. As a consequence, for you as a leader, there is a much higher need for you to be conscious and effective as a leader, to think about, who am I as a leader? How do I act around people? How do I manage myself? And how do I engage in my relationships with the people that I am responsible for and the responsible to as a leader, in terms of facilitating them forwards? And that means that you need to look at your self-awareness around head, heart, and body, taking care of that self so that you can share that with others, so that you can be focused and not be going in an unintended direction because you haven't thought about, I'm actually treating everybody as if they can't be trusted, and recognizing that when you do that, you are going to not be able to trust people and they won't trust you. So this is really about you as a leader taking up the mantle and thinking about who you are and what you do. And at this point in time, you have a fabulous opportunity to reset the button, to rethink how you do things, but also a great opportunity to support a lot of people that are struggling, and that to help your organization to move forward for the best by taking up the mantle of leadership in a way that is positive and that you can live Plato's virtues. So that's a lot of information for today, and I would like to thank you all for being here today. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. And so if anybody has questions that they have put in the box, or questions that people would like to ask, please feel free to share those questions. And I think Marina and Robin, you might have that open, right, for me.
We do, Rensia, yeah. So I first just want to say to everyone who needs to jump, because we are on the hour, we are going to record the Q&A, so it's great that Rensia is going to hang around for a little bit longer, and if you need to catch up on that later, you'll be able to do that with the recording. So Rensia, let's dive right in. Do you have any tips for folks as they start welcoming staff and volunteers back into physical locations?
Actually, I think there's a couple of things that people need to be aware of. You need to, first of all, be thinking about how are these people coming back, and recognizing that there may be some adaptation fatigue. So they're coming back not the same as the way that they left. So that's for you, is to some extent explore. And one of the things that I talk about to people is you want to have kind of an idea of who are my people, and you can do that on a very broad level. You know, if you happen to have a lot of older people or younger people at different life stages coming back into the workplace. So again, that connecting and communicating are really important parts of it. Don't act as if it's back to the way that it was. Acknowledge that things have changed, acknowledge that things are hard, make sure that you have the resources, and also that you have an understanding of what they're going through, and reassure them around any concerns or anxiety that they might have about safety measures. Because it's very easy, once people start getting back into what looks like a normal routine, it's very easy for them. I've heard stories already about people that are using the same keyboard in the organization because they're working with something where they take turns on this keyboard where they're managing an appliance, and they don't wipe down because they're not used to that. So one of the things that you want to do is, as a leader, you need to be aware of where people are coming from, and that they're just going to want, in many ways, they're just going to want to go back to the way it was, and helping them understand that that can't be, and helping them understand that that is hard. So the communication, the communication, the acknowledgement, and even as things go back to normal, building in a how are you doing, piece, facilitating connection with each other. I hope that makes sense for people.
Yeah, I think those are great tips. Now, on kind of the opposite to that, Helen is asking or is mentioning that they're actually having a limited return of volunteers because of the adapted programs. And Helen's wondering if you might have tips on helping volunteers to move on and get closure due to the fact that they might be losing now this regular activity that they might have had every week in terms of volunteering. And I would think that would probably apply to some staff positions as well.
Absolutely. And you know what, one of the keys to that is staying in touch, because this is in many ways a temporary situation. It will somewhere along the line change again. So with the volunteers, I think, first of all, you recognize what they've done and how important they are for the organization and have been for the organization. You stay in touch with them. So one of the things you might want to do is continue to acknowledge them with keeping them on the email list or something, or keeping them on the new, if you give out regular newsletters, continuing to acknowledge that that they are still part of your community, and that in the future things may change, and keep them connected with the cause, and to help them kind of close that off. That people do that in different kinds of ways. That can be with a group meeting where you actually have a formal kind of closure ritual where people can say goodbye or temporarily say goodbye, where you can do it in a group, or if it's a smaller group, you can do it one-on-one, where you just sit with people and talk to them about how much you've appreciated what they've done, recognize their contribution, and have that conversation, and refer them to maybe other places or resources that they can access if people are really struggling. So just a lot of it is about giving them a good closure and a good recognition, one-on-one or in a group with each other. And the flip side for that is the people that are coming back, what we see, especially when it's like with layoffs, what we see is that the people that are there, they often have a kind of survivor guilt. So they also need to have some form of closure and farewell where with the people that are being let go and not coming back.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've also had quite a few questions come in about building trust as folks are continuing to work remotely. So not everybody's coming back into the office. How can leaders either carry on with trust building, or in some cases, maybe they're actually a new leader leading a staff team for the first time and they're now doing it all remotely? Do you have tips on that?
Yeah, and that is definitely a challenge. And it is one of the things, and I think this is one of the things where you want to go back around challenging your own ideas and decision making around, do I think people can be trusted? Because the reality is that most people want to work, they want to contribute. People are not all hedonistic. This is, when I was still in university, we talked about theory X and theory Y, about are people wolves or are they sheep, right? So do people do what they're told? Do you need to tell them what to do, or are they all out in it for themselves? And the reality is people are not. Most people that are working from home are reporting that they're doing more hours. And so if you want to build trust, there's a couple of different things. First of all, you treat people as if they can be treated. So, and that can come through in how you give them tasks or how you give them deadlines around what you need from them, rather than, like the Siemens. I think this quote is really significant, where he talks about looking at outcomes rather than how many hours are people sitting at the desk or how many keystrokes are people making. Looking at a longer term vision of what is the outcome that I'm looking for with this person, and giving them the autonomy and giving them the trust that they will actually come through and do that, whether it's with their kids on their lap, or whether it's, at 8 o'clock at night after they put the kids to bed, or whatever it is that is going on for them in their life as well. Looking at the outcomes, treating them as if they can be trusted. And again, that humanity, and that humility and encouraging people to take self-care. So trusting people that if you say, what are you doing for self-care? How are you taking breaks for yourself? Those kind of things have a paradoxical impact on people. If I say to you, I want you to be able to take a break. So how can we make that happen? Like, I really need you to be able to step away and refocus, and so that you are taking care of yourself. That actually makes people more willing to do things for you, and it makes them in turn also trust you, because you're treating them with trust. And it sounds very simple, but that's how easy it is, really.
Mm-hmm. And
assuming that they can be trusted.
Absolutely, and we're certainly seeing that shift, with the focus on outcomes, and that's certainly been key. With everything that everyone's trying to juggle with COVID while working.
And I would add there, absolutely, Marina. And what I would add there is also, of course, facilitating for people to be able to do what you ask them to do. So you can say, I'm going to shift to outcome, but you need to also have that conversation with people about what's in the way for them of actually achieving those outcomes. Like, is there something that is that we've set up in a way that actually makes it much harder for them? So having that conversation with people.
Mm-hmm. So I see we're about 10 minutes over. I think we're going to wrap things there. Rensia, did you have any final comments before we sign off for today?
I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank people for putting their questions forward. If there were more questions, Marina, than we can manage in the time, I'm happy to answer those in email if you play them forward to me. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. I hope that people found some things that they can take forward and that they can integrate into their work as leaders and their perceptions of how they are as leaders. And I would wish everybody a safe and great day going forward.
Wonderful. Well, and everyone, you'll see Rensia's contact information is there. So if your question did not get answered and you want to reach out to her directly, please go ahead and do so. With that, I just want to thank Rensia as well. Such a wonderful presentation, so jam-packed with information and certainly things that are top of mind for everyone right now. So thank you for coming back and presenting to our audience today. I just want to remind everyone that we will follow up with you by email this afternoon with the webinar recording and the slide deck. There will be a short survey to fill out. It takes less than 5 minutes, so I hope that you'll complete that for us if you can. You'll have an opportunity there to let us know if there are other topics you'd like to see covered in a future session, and we'll share that feedback with Rensia as well. I'd like to remind you all that Charity Village does have a lot of resources available to you right now. We do have a dedicated COVID-19 resource page. Our job postings are currently available at a 15% discount until August 31st, and you can also access a $10 discount on our online courses through August. Those discount codes are included on that COVID-19 resource page, and I'll include a link to that in the follow-up email that you'll receive later today. We have also just launched a new video interviewing platform to assist you when hiring staff or recruiting volunteers, and more information about that is also available in the link that we'll send out. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you again for taking the time to join us today. Our next free webinar will be held on Thursday, September 10th, and will be an overview of how CFRE accreditation can help advance your fundraising career. We'll include a link in the email today in case you'd like to register. With that, thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.